Travel and Things in association with Sun Destinations, iconic destinations with amazing experiences, present In Conversation With. I am your host, David Batsoffen, and today I'm very pleased to be joined by Paula Slier, who is an international journalist, media trainer, and public speaker. She also founded Newshound Media International and the Newshound Academy and has reported on conflict from zones all over the world for the last 30 years, which is probably the last time you and I spoke, Paula, just before you headed off to go and become an international media star. But
You're
that,
giving away our age.
I know, but what the heck? We can do at our age, we're entitled to do that. We can wear our age with pride. We really can. But that's not why we're chatting today. We're not looking at war zones afar. We're looking at war zones within. And we always watch documentaries like the Tinder Swindler. I watched Love Con Revenge yesterday in preparation for our chat. And you always say, ha, this will never happen to me, or it will never happen to somebody I know. And folks, that's why Paula's chatting with me today, is because Paula was conned. And I wanted to hear her story from herself and how easy it is, because we all look at these and go, ah, you know, it must have been easy to figure out. We just didn't see the red flags. So, Paula, firstly, thank you very much for joining me, because this can't be easy to do. It really cannot. So talk us through the meeting, sort of the beginning, the middle, and the end of this terrifying ordeal for you.
Well, firstly, David, thank you so much for having me. It's not great talking about it, and I didn't actually talk about it for about a year after
Right,
everything exploded, found out what happened. And I think that's because one feels a deep sense of shame. Exactly
right.
like you said, you hear about these romance frauds. Most of them are online, and I was one of, like you say, those people who thinks, "Oh, how stupid could this woman
Yeah.
have been?" or could this man have been? And the red flags stare you straight in the face. And I know that as I'm about to share just a quick summary of what happened to me, you and I are going to laugh because when I explain it, the red flags are startlingly clear. The
Yeah.
problem is that you only really notice the red flags in retrospect.
Mm.
When you actually look through it, you don't notice them. And I've done a lot of reading and research about romance con, they call it. And it's almost like all these con artists come from the same school. There's, since I've started speaking about it and writing about it, a lot of men and women, and I say men because interestingly enough, the most susceptible group to online romance fraud is white men in their 60s and 70s, American. And last year, the online romance fraud amounted to something like $1.3 billion in the United States alone.
It's almost
And
up
when
there with
I,
those 419 scams. We've
it's,
got
it's, it's,
$20 million in a bank account. All you got to do is give us 10 million and we'll give you the rest.
Well, David, it's funny you mentioned that. Do you remember many, many years ago, we used to get Nigerian emails? I still
Yes,
sometimes get them. So that's exactly that. This
exactly
is the
it.
evolution of that.
Ah,
And they call them the Yahoo boys. And they are young guys who've dropped out of
mm,
school. They work shifts, 7-hour shifts in sweatshops in Nigeria and Ghana predominantly.
right.
And the or the man, because obviously they don't reveal their proper identity, feel
Yeah.
that they're being love bombed. And they feel that this person on the other end is 24/7 paying them attention. Sadly, what the reality is that it shifts. So your young guy works a shift, hands over his notes after 7 hours, and then the next guy comes in and does a shift. And it's one of, like I said, one of the fastest
Mm.
growing frauds. It's just an evolution and a more modern version of those Nigerian emails that some
Wow.
of us still for all those years ago. So my story is I didn't meet him online, but I
Mm.
mean, that doesn't really make me any more discerning or clever than the woman that I used to like disparage online and say, how can I be so
Yeah.
stupid? I met him through my now ex-best friend.
Yeah, I saw that in
I'm
the
still
article.
struggling.
The X was very
The
almost
ex-best, yeah,
highlighted.
very noticeable.
Yes.
I'm still trying to come to terms. I actually don't know if she was part of it. I think that's one betrayal that's a little bit too hard to stomach at
Yeah.
this stage. Samantha and I had been best friends for 30 years, and she was dating for 10 years his cousin.
Mm.
Anyway, I met Trevor, and the first time I met him, I thought nothing, and I only met him 6 months later. And what I'm sharing with you, I've played over in my mind 100 times,
I'm
and
sure.
some of it I kind of found a satisfying answer to, but some of it I
Mm.
haven't. And what I haven't found an answer to is why, after 6 months, the second time I met him, suddenly he was appealing. I don't know. But I know, this I know. In those 6 months, he studied me. He didn't present it as studying, and I didn't interpret it as studying. I
Right.
interpreted it as, wow, this he likes me, because he told me
Mm.
he'd watched all my videos online. He quoted me, some of the lines from the articles I'd written, and I remember being
Okay.
quite flattered and thinking, wow, this guy really must like me. I mean,
Mm.
he spent so much time studying me, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word. It's only later that you realize that that's the first phase. The first
Mm.
phase is that they do study, and they study you because they want to know who they need to be in order for you to fall in love with
Okay.
them. I met him through Samantha. I think I was 49 at the time.
Mm.
And when we went on our first date, I was flabbergasted that sitting in front of me was the man of my dreams. And when they say something is too good to be true, it is too
Yeah.
good to be true.
If it walks like a duck and quacks
And then
like
the
a
red
duck, it's
flag
a duck.
that I missed,
Sorry. I think we spoke over each other, saying if it walks like a duck and
100%.
quacks
And then
like a
the
duck.
red flags
Yeah.
that I missed, and
Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
it has to be a duck.
Yeah.
Well, so you're going to smile and you're going to cringe when I share the next part with you. But he was a mercenary. What I'm about to tell you, everything is not true. But I only
Okay.
found out a year and a half later. We dated for 6 months and then we got married for a year. And the whole thing exploded a year later, actually, in the week that my father passed. It was a difficult week, and my dad died. And in the same week, I found out who Trevor really was. So the story, just quickly, is he told me he was a mercenary. He'd been to all these war zones that I'd been to. David, he used to share stories with me that were, I mean, I want to say unbelievable. I mean, I didn't realize how unbelievable they were at the time. But to the point that I stopped sharing my war stories, because he had overthrown governments in Africa. He told me he'd worked for the United Nations based in Kenya for 11 years, and he ran their operations there. Everything was covert and everything was secret. So it had this element of mystery and intrigue. And I was just so caught up in his lies. He told me he was special forces, which I only checked after I started doubting everything. And of course, he wasn't. Actually, if you ask me who this guy is, I think he's a second-hand car dealer and he's really from Krugersdorp. But I didn't know any of that at the time. I actually don't know who he is. He
Still
told
to
me
this day.
he told still to this day, he told me he was dying of brain cancer and he
Mm.
had a year to live. And
But
that's why I married him. Yeah.
doesn't that harken back to what was her name? Apple cider vinegar, Bella Gibson
Yeah.
in Australia, who conned everybody into believing she was dying of cancer and made a fortune out of it and wasn't even sorry about it at the end of the day. She was
So
supposedly an influencer.
David, so it's what I'm saying to you. It's like they've all gone to the same school
Right.
because I mean, maybe that's the way to prevent it, is just to educate oneself, because potentially where they fall down is the stories are the same. But
Mm.
until you start becoming aware of the stories, and even that maybe doesn't protect one, because you just don't believe it's happening to you.
Yeah.
You know, I think I'm reasonably intelligent. I've been covering war zones for 20 years, which means that I would investigate. Often if it was an enemy, you investigate the person, you study the person. Um, and I don't know if it's about falling in love, and maybe it is. And often when I share my story with girls and women, they immediately take my side, whereas the men are more, how could you just do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But matters of the heart. I really thought I'd met my
Mm.
I was going to
You
write a book, and I was going to call it Second Chances. And the book
right.
was going to be about how, at the age of 49, I had met my dream man. And it was going to be a book for women out there, many, many women who are either divorced at that age or
Mm.
haven't met the guy, and it was going to kind of give us all hope that these things do happen. And I couldn't believe my luck. I could not believe that at the age of 49, and I'd never really wanted to get married, but
Mm.
of course, everybody wants to be the partner of their dreams,
Yeah.
and I couldn't believe that. So here are the red flags. The red flags are, why did we have to get married? And he
Mm.
said, if he only had a year to live, nothing would make him happier than marrying me. And, me and my pathetic wisdom thought, oh, well, if I could help a dying man. Second, second red flag is normally the family sees straight through him. My
Yeah.
mom, my sister, my brother warned me from it's from day one. And I'll say this because I want people to know that we can all do this. I said to them in no uncertain words, I'm 49, I've traveled the world, I've covered something like 40 conflict zones. I think
Mm.
I can tell the difference. I think I'm grown up
Mm.
enough to know my own mind. And haven't I lived to eat those words? Um, and then what happened is I was working for the Russian television at the time. He kind of convinced me, but I take responsibility. I must have been ready for it. And I definitely
Mm.
went into the next project with my eyes wide open, is I left the Russian television and I set up what was called a BRICS channel, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa TV channel. I funded it. And I'd always been interested in Saudi Arabia. Okay, I
Right.
have no idea why. And I was fascinated by the Saudis, and I always wanted to go and travel. I haven't even been there. And believe it or not, I mean, can you believe that Trevor knew someone in the Saudi government who was going to finance this project? I mean, it was just, the stories were just like unbelievable, but amazingly fantastic, and exactly what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
So for a year, so for almost a year and a half, I hired 40 staff. I, through my company, rented space at Future Space in Sandton, and and the colleagues that I hired made TV programs for more than a year. It was between a year and a half. We set up social media, we set up a website, so we had news-driven sites. But the idea was that the minute the Saudis would sign the contract, Trevor
Mm.
and I would relocate to Riyadh, and the channel would be launched immediately. And so by
Right.
the end of that period, I had enough content to go live on air for between 4 and 6 months. So I was just building up this archive of material, shows, documentaries. I hired Juveka Rangappa. I hired Ray White. I hired Juliet Newell. I mean,
Mm.
there was nothing to suggest that this project wasn't real. And as a journalist, you really only have your reputation. So
Yeah.
of course the staff believed me, and I believed Trevor. And I
And
pumped
they,
in my entire life. Yeah.
just before we get into the money side, Paula, none of the people that you hired had done any research into Trevor. So they didn't come to you and
No.
say, Paula, we're not, yes, we'd love to be part of this, but no, there's some red flags here. We've done some background checks, and nobody seems to know who this man is, least of all the Saudis.
David, no one did that. So to answer your question, no. I don't know if we can. I mean, at some point in my very sad story, I did get comfort that he'd managed to con a newsroom of journalists, 40 journalists. And the sad thing was that my dad, the 3 weeks before he passed away, and it was
Mm.
actually this time last year, all of this
Right.
exploded last year, I took about 3 weeks off from the office because I wanted to sit next to my dad in his last
Sure.
moments. And that gave me time to go through the bank accounts. And that's how everything came.
Ah.
And after my father passed away, I went back after sitting Shiva and remembering, the whole mourning
Mm.
process. He had taken over the business. He had put a sign over my door saying he had taken over the company. There were there were documents that he had forged, and there were also documents that I had signed, not knowing, that's another, like, not knowing exactly what he was planning to use them for.
Right.
And every one, and I was locked out of my premises, and inside was millions of rands of worth of equipment, and every single one of my staff members went with him, to the point that even today, some of them still believe him. The only person, and it's worth mentioning it, who came forward was, after about a week or two, Juliet Newell, who anchors on SABC, phoned me, and she said, I just can't believe the terrible things they're saying about you. And I don't know what she was talking about. And I said, Juliet, what are you talking about? So we decided to meet for coffee. I came with a whole pile of papers.
Mm.
So if I can just go back 1 second,
Sure.
what basically happened is that the Saudis never existed.
Right.
And Trevor and his mother, who I had employed as my internal bookkeeper because she didn't have a job and I felt sorry for her, and Trevor's daughter, who I made social media. In the last few months, Trevor and his mother, who had signing powers and direct access to my bank, had stolen 6 million rand directly from the company into Trevor's personal bank
Mm.
account. And parallel to that, there was no Saudi. Trevor used to go twice a week to the Saudi embassy, or so he told me. He had one of those white Muslim outfits that you
Mm.
go and pray, and he offered it on a Friday because he said, this is true. The building of relationships in the Muslim world and the Arab world are vital.
Yeah.
And he was always going with them to mosque to build the relationship. And the few times I'd said to him, please, can I come and meet the Saudis? There were a few times when the Saudis were coming to the office and we got the office ready and I made programs and presentations to give them. And we hired the boardroom and we brought in caterers. I think it happened 3 times. They never came. They always cancelled at the last minute.
Mm.
And there were no Saudis. Like, where was he going? For all I know, David, for all I know, he had another girlfriend. He had many girlfriends. I don't know.
Mhm.
He enjoyed gambling. I suspect now that it was an addiction. But, when him and I used to go out, he often wanted us to go to the casino. And at the time, it never
Right.
felt like an addiction because I guess I didn't know what a gambling addiction was.
Yeah.
But the essence is that the Saudis never existed and that he stole my money. And when I came back to the office, and like I told you, the only person who contacted me was Juliet, and we met for coffee. And I remember coming with piles and piles of paper because I got an independent auditor to go through
Mm.
the bank accounts, summarize and show me all the transactions. And I presented it to her, and she said she just said Trevor's stories just had become too ludicrous. The thing about these guys is, I don't know. I think they tell their lies too often, so often that they begin to believe them themselves. But
Yeah.
I was going to say the thing about them is that the lies are consistent. So he had told me the same things he had told the staff. And a psychologist said to me, that's one of the telltale signs is that if you and I are recounting something that happened in our lives, we can very often tell the same story but with little differences in details or differences in
Correct.
nuances. He
Yeah.
did. His story is perfectly the same. So I take a little bit of comfort that everybody fell for him in the newsroom. I mean, he told them the money was his, which was a lie. He told them I was stealing money. I hadn't gone. So to answer your question, and it's a really valid question, is nobody did their homework either. And I think it's bad journalism on all our parts. I think they just trusted me. I think, I met them, and if this is my husband, I introduced him as my husband and I'd made him the CEO. They maybe had no reason not to trust him.
Yeah.
Third, he was just such a good con artist. And lastly, and I think this is true for me and for them, you want something so badly.
Yeah.
You kind of want not to look at the red flags.
Yeah. I see from the
And
programs that I've watched and listening to you speak now, that's exactly it. The target market is very definite, and there is there's a certain look. If you watch particular con artists, they target certain women, and the women could be interchangeable, both from a looks point of view and a background point of view. And as you were saying, at the end of the day, there must be a script that he's following. It's almost like that Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Catch Me If You Can, where he played many roles. He was an airline pilot, he was all sorts of things, and nobody ever disbelieved him because he came across as an airline pilot. He had the hat, he had the briefcase, and I'm sure in Trevor's situation, he prepped himself. He knew what you were looking for. You'd fallen for it, and then he could just build on that with little things. And as you pointed out, lies, if repeated often enough, become your own truth. And then
I
it's
mentioned,
difficult. Yeah.
yeah, I mentioned those 6 months. So I'd met him, I hadn't liked him, I'd gone away for 6 months. He used those 6 months. He studied me, and
Right.
exactly what you say. I mean, I think he knew what I wanted in a man better than I did. He just was so perfect. He was a
Yeah.
mercenary. He knew the Russian politics. He had lived and fought in the Middle East. Um, it was just phenomenal. And again, I think they've done it before. Like,
Yeah.
I am convinced that Trevor has done this before. And the last I heard is that he was with a new girlfriend,
Hmm.
and I'm sure he's conning her too as well. And what you say, they are clever people on some level. They well, look, Trevor was good looking. Most of these guys are good looking, I think. I think
Yeah.
that's part of the appeal. They are so smooth and they are so convincing. If they put that amount of attention into actually a genuine career, but I mean, exactly like, in
Yeah.
that movie, like you say, he's able to do so many different professions. Trevor knew nothing about media. If you go online and you read about him, there's a whole media profile.
Mm.
It is all a lie. And the other thing that maybe is worth mentioning is that happened, and nobody believed out later that Trevor had said to them, because we never paid the last month's salary. I had literally run out of money, or the company had run out of money.
Yeah.
And I'd said to the staff, this is what happened. Nobody believed me. I said, if any of you are interested in perhaps finding a way to salvage the company, no one contacted me. I was advised that the company should go into voluntary liquidation. Trevor took all that footage, all that material that I had like devoted a year and a half of
Yeah.
my life to. He has opened a new website called Bricks TV Global. I think that's what it's
Mm.
called. It's all available there. All he's done is take away my name and selling it like his own. So I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, how can this happen? I went to the police. I filed three police cases. The one
Mm.
is for the commercial crime. The case warrants Hawks. But the last contact was that the Hawks still haven't come to fetch the paper. It's still sitting in the Sandton police safe, and that the Hawks are 2 years behind in their investigations. So,
But
no surprise. This is a country
yeah.
where you literally get away with murder.
Yeah. Well, luckily in your case, not. I mean, he murdered your finances, but you're still around to tell the story. Have you reached out in order to warn whoever he's with that they should be aware? Or are you hoping that writing the newspaper article that you did, being here with me, and this will be shared on my social media platforms, that whoever is with him now might take a step back and go, Stoppie bus. Let's have another look at this, or the next time we see him. And we've been very careful, people. We haven't posted pictures of his face on our chat. My chat with Paula, we haven't mentioned him by his full name. And Trevor might not even be his real name for all Paula knows. If everything else is a construct, that might be as well. And I noticed this from the American stuff, and I've had friends scammed in Australia. It's difficult to prove because the police don't believe you. They literally in Love Con Revenge, the cop made the one woman sit in the car for 4 hours in the blazing sun to walk out and say thank you for the paperwork. And then it was 8 months before they got back to her. He was tried in her particular case, but he was set free to continue to do exactly the same.
So, I mean, I love that Con Revenge series. I keep thinking I should have thought of that, and like maybe that could have been the next step in my career,
I was
because
waiting to see you up there. I really was. I thought maybe your story's
maybe
here.
I will still. So maybe I'm just trying to think how to answer your question, because I would have liked to have thought that I was the kind of person that would immediately want to warn women, and I haven't.
Right.
It's gone through my mind times. I think initially it's the shock. I mean, I was in love with this. I don't know. I was in love with this person. It wasn't Trevor, but I
Mm.
was in love with somebody that didn't exist. My father died, and I was just knocked.
Yeah.
I mean, when I spoke with the staff, I cried. And to this day, I get hate mail from some of the staff who still don't believe me. And the other day, I got an email from one of the girls saying, "Your crocodile tears." I think they think it's all a performance.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm saying, David, is I have to be stronger, and it knocks you for a loop.
Yeah.
There were weeks when I couldn't get out of bed where I was the overriding feeling is shame. We laughed at the beginning. You look at these
Yeah.
women and you think how stupid they. I mean, I think I'm relatively intelligent. I don't think I was desperate I had been in a long-term relationship. I'd come out of a 12-year relationship. I don't think I was desperate to meet someone, but
Mm.
he must have touched parts of me um, that, like you say, they he I had never met a man like him before. And I fell headless, hopelessly, headlessly in love, or whatever the expression is.
Yeah.
And there was so much to do that I handed over the entire finance of the company to him. Now, I know that is ridiculous, and maybe that's part of why I needed to go through
Yeah.
this, to learn not to. again if I ever am in a situation that I have that money again. But it just didn't occur to me. I mean, I was so blinded that this was a man that I married. It didn't occur to me that I needed to check the bank accounts because my
Yeah.
husband was. Um, so to answer your question more directly, I couldn't talk about this for about a year. I was so ashamed. I thought like, I've been a journalist for 30 years. This happened to me. I've lost everything. I cashed in my life savings. I cashed in everything. I've got nothing to show for what I've done for 30 years of journalism from a financial point of view. And this guy took it away in a year. I felt like my career was over. Reputation is everything. And
Yeah.
they went to the Devi he went to Devi Govinder's show and she took his side. I think he conned Devi as well. Um, and in the show, Juliet, who I met, said to me,
Mm.
"Well, they're actually going to get Devi." And I phoned Devi and I said, "Devi, you're looking for me? I'm here. Let me come tell my story. I have
Yeah.
nothing to hide." I get the wads of paper. And in the show, she says to him, "Did you take money?" And he says, "No." And she goes, "Trevor, Trevor." And she hands him the wads of paper and he says, "Okay, I'm going to pay it back." She never followed up if he paid it back. I mean, firstly,
Yeah.
she didn't even ask for the money in the first place. But be that as it may, um, I think I need to be in a stronger place. I
Yeah.
think I need to be in a stronger place to warn other women. I have been in relationships where men say their ex-wife is mad, and you know
Mm.
what? We believe them. So I
Yeah.
had this vision of phoning his new girlfriend and saying he's not who you think he is. And I had this very clear vision that he would tell him and he would say, "You see, I told you my ex is
Man.
completely mad, off the wall, everything." Just one quick final thing was that I was in Boksburg out of all places. I'd gone to a restaurant and I was talking to the owner. They had a
Right.
marriage that day, and I said, "Well, maybe I should come and celebrate my divorce," which is actually not nice because I was so happy to get married.
Mm.
And my father was still alive. He'd lost his legs by that time, and he wheeled me down to get married. And
Mm.
I'm just looking at a photo now of me and my dad. The last photo I have of me and my dad is my dad smiling at the wedding. So it's nothing to celebrate getting divorced, but
Yeah.
I'd started talking to the owner, and the owner, I told him my story, and he said, "What was the guy's name?" And I told him his name, and he went cold. And he said, "Show me a picture of him." And I showed him a picture, and he said, "I do not believe this. This Afrikaans guy, and Trevor's Afrikaans." And he said he belongs to a number of Afrikaans dating apps. And that morning, Trevor's name popped up and his photo with some woman warning that he's a con artist. So he's obviously at it again. I do feel like, I should warn women in something.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to survive the moment, and then
Yeah.
I'll get stronger and I'll warn women.
Great stuff. Paula, thank you so much for sharing with me. I know this is not easy, specifically with your dad looking down on you. And I liked spending time with your father. He was a really, really wonderful human being. So thank you for sharing. I hope that people that watch this realize that it's easier than you think to be conned, and don't laugh when you find out who has been conned, because you could be the very next person, really and truly. I hope you go from, pardon me, from strength to strength, Paula, and that one day there is a book or there is a talk on the circuit, a TED talk, something like that going, when red flags are red flags, they are red flags. End of story. Believe it or not. Paula, thank you once again for joining me here on In Conversation With.
It's an absolute pleasure. And I just, last line, I started a website called redflagstv.com, and
Ah,
I
there you
started
go.
writing. So if anyone they, because sometimes people reach out and maybe in
Yeah.
bigger numbers, we're stronger. David, it's thanks to people like you who open to hearing the story.